The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to a midweek edition. It is here. It is Hail Varsity Radio. Elijah Herbel sitting in today for Chris Schmidt, as we'll be hearing from Schmidty just a little bit later in the show. He's off to Kauffman Stadium tonight checking out some playoff baseball. It's the Royals and the Yanks going down tonight. So Schmidty spending his bye week. Well, me, not so much. I'm still at work, but we still have a fun show planned for you here this afternoon. We're about 20 minutes away from hearing Mike Babcock's thoughts mid-season, Nebraska, the Big Ten. A whole lot more coming from Mike Babcock. That's at 4:25. Schmidty's coming probably at 4:40, as he's texted me he's going to be inside the stadium, and he's going to be at his seats giving us a live hit from Kauffman. So that should be a lot of fun. That's coming up at 4:40. And then at the top of hour number 2, we'll have Evan Bland from the Omaha World Herald join us. That's at 5:05. And we'll cap this show off with a Jock Doc a little bit later this hour, talking to Rashee Rice, the knee injury, the report better than expected, but still going to be out for the season. As a Broncos fan, it's like, do we want to talk Rashee Rice with all the drama? And I thought about the audience. I thought about the market. A lot of Chiefs fans around here, so we'll get Dr. Brandon's take on that knee injury suffered by Rashee Rice. Plenty of chances for you to join the show today. Give us a call, 402-489-1240. Again, that's 402-489-1240. That's where you get yourself in on the phone lines. You can also check us out in the stream, Hail Varsity YouTube page. Join the live stream there where there's already plenty of people. We'll get to the starting five here in just a minute. You can also check us out, the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter/X account at HVarsity Radio. We stream live every single day as well. Sitting in with me today and making his co-hosting debut, he's got the board down pretty well. So we're like, you know what? Schmidty's gone. Let's take him straight out the frying pan and into the fire. Justice Rhody making his co-hosting debut. Justice, good to have you. Look at you making your way up in the world.
Hey, great to be here. Great to start climbing the corporate ladder, in the world of big radio, as they say. It's exciting. It's a midweek. It's a bye week. So there's, running scarce on topics, but we're going to find a fun way to have a time today.
I mean, it's football season. And this is, I know you're new to this. There's what is always like off-season talk. July, I'd say from the 4th of July up until about Big Ten Media Days, there's like a 2.5-3 week stretch where it's just ultimate off-season talk. And people always it's the same topics, if we're being 100% honest with ourselves, because that's like the doldrums. Bye week? Oh, come on. This is like, you're getting set up. It's not the easiest week in the world, but we still got plenty of football to talk about, and that makes things easy.
Well, just not Husker football, Elijah. That's the problem. There's just everybody, they're trying to go 1-0 against the bye week this week. I heard Florida State went 0-1 against their bye week. That's not good. So Matt Rhule trying to get the boys in check, in tune before they go on the road to Indiana and go see Coach Sig.
This is all true. I mean, I got some topics up my sleeve. We'll get into that here in just a second.
We have topics.
Oh, yeah. We got it up our sleeve. So a good show planned for everyone at home today. Hope you keep it tuned in here with us. Where we start, though, is Justice. It's your first chance. I think you've already said more words into that mic than you've said in the past 3 weeks combined. So I want to give you a chance. Introduce yourself to the people. What's funny is today's show is me born in 99, you born in, I think, 2004?
03.
03, okay. Born in 03. Think about that. Think about how old we are. I know there's going to be people sitting at home today disagreeing with our perspective on Husker football. Just want to lay that out first. I think it's kind of part of the fun. There is the generational gap in Husker football. What today's show is legitimately the young people ruling the roost. So I'm sure there's going to be things you disagree with. If you do, give us a call. 402-489-1240. How about that plug? But Justice, give us a little introduction on yourself. What brought you to Nebraska? What brought you here to this station? And your relationship with Husker football.
Well, yeah, so I was born in 2003, so for all the people that are flipping their lid that my birth year starts with a 2 and a 0, it's, Just cool it for a little bit. Grew up in Oklahoma. I was born and raised in northern Wisconsin. That's Badger territory for those of you that haven't been tapped into that. Born and raised in Oklahoma. Born and raised in Wisconsin. Moved to Oklahoma. I've lived there for most of my life. I'm 20 years old. I turned 21 on the 17th of October. My relation to Husker football really, I just got into it. As I came to college here, to be totally honest. I grew up, I watched a lot of different football. I was always, into sports, always loved sports, played a lot of football, basketball, baseball. I was a 5'6" sport athlete in high school, and then came up here and learned about the culture and tradition of Husker football and just tried to immerse myself. Yes, I am a junior in college. I'm a sports media communications and broadcasting major at the great University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Being taught currently by Friday frequenter, Professor Bill Dolman, great guy, teaching me the ropes, learning a ton. But that's really where my expertise in Husker football has come, is just immersing myself and talking to a bunch of the people around here and getting connected. So not a native Husker, but being a transplant has been more of my avenue into Husker football.
We have some comments in the stream. 2003, my God. Andy Harris chimes in to say, I graduated high school in 2003. Expletive, Justice can be my son. KG says, Justice not even eligible to be drafted into the NFL just yet.
Just like Ryan Williams.
It's the youth movement. That's what this is.
The youth movement.
It's the youth movement here on Hail Varsity Radio. Quick story time for you here, as I'm not sure if I've ever laid this out on the air. I promise we'll get to Husker football here in just a moment.
We will.
But the place that you come from, like for reference, I got a text from my dad. I'm going to pull this up because it's hilarious. Last week during the Friday forecast, I get the text from my father. Elijah, are you the only intern they have hired that didn't have a smooth radio voice? So it'd be your own family sometimes that'd be talking trash. But you get that, and it kind of like reminded me of whenever I was your age and I was starting out here at the radio station, where I had done maybe 5 hours of talk radio in my entire lifetime. They were all on the student radio station at UNL. We talked soccer, and then I showed up here, and it was definitely being thrown into the fire. So the place that you start from, so far advanced. Just excited to have you. I mean, you've already started out this show on a great note, and I'm sure the people are excited to have you.
Yeah, excited to be here. Tiger Shark Diver asked me what brought me to UNL. How do I answer this as plainly as possible? They gave me a lot of money to be here. I went to the place with the highest bidder, and there was another comment. I want to give credit here. Becky Catron says, Justice has basically never seen a good Nebraska football team. Yeah, my first season was the 2022 season with Casey Thompson, the last year of he who shall not be named as head coach. I watched the Georgia Southern game live, and I wanted to cry afterwards. So that should just tell you how immersed I was 3 games in. So I basically have not seen a good Husker football team until this year, 5-1.
As we dive into the Hail Varsity Radio starting 5, we'll get to Husker football here in just a moment. Got to shout out the people who are in first. We first have Logan chiming in saying, OMG, that guy Justice is so cute. Justice, already winning hearts.
One of my buddies.
But number 1 into the stream, Justin. So Justin is in first. We have Toned Zeus coming in number 2. Arlo is in 3, and your grandpa in at 4. The other Dave rounds out the starting 5. Coming in off the bench, we got Uncle Larry, KG, Mr. Erickson, Sexy Grinch coming in, Brennan also in, Roger, Jeff Snitley, famously of the Boulder Peace Treaty. I gave Justice a rundown of the Boulder Peace Treaty here before the show, so he is aware, Snitley boys. Jeff is in. We also have Tuck, Ronnie, Jim, A-Dub, all of these coming in. Tim asks if he's a part of the top 15. It's arguable. I didn't go to school for math, so don't ask me. But
he's a part of the roster.
Top 15. He's on the team.
He's on the roster. He's practicing.
He's on the team. So Tim, it is good to have you in. Becky also in. Jordan in. As we keep on scrolling here, I try to read as quickly as possible. Maybe the real Matthew, Great Red Shark, also in here as a part of the Hail Varsity Radio starting 5, and NASCAR Eric chimes in at 4:15. That brings me now to where we lead off this show in terms of Nebraska football talk. It's been a long 10 minutes getting you guys all introduced to Justice, but I promised we'd get to Husker football. That is what we do now. Where I want to start this show off, and a theme I kind of want to ask both Mike Babcock and Evan Bland a little bit later this hour, is through 18 games, what would you grade Matt Rhule? We've kind of started off this week in a roundabout way, doing mid-season report cards for this Husker football team through 6 games. We're through 12 games of the Matt Rhule era. This seems like a good chance to sit back and ask ourselves, how do you rate Matt Rhule's first, 20 months on the job? So through 18 games, through 20 months, what do you rate Matt Rhule? Give us your thoughts in the stream at Hail Varsity on YouTube at H Varsity Radio, or give us a call 402-489-1240. I'll be first into the deep end here, and I will give Matt Rhule a solid B, airing on a B+, depending on what happens against Indiana. If you can get bowl eligible before Ohio State, I think that takes me all the way from a B to a B+, grading the first 18 games of the Matt Rhule era. You look at the young talent that he's brought in, the kind of the best he's been able to get out of some of these guys that were left over. It was a different type of transition than what we saw with Scott Frost, where Scott Frost, the discussion for probably 2 years was, well, once he gets his guys in, Matt Rhule came in, he showed up, he treated the guys that he inherited as his guys, tried to get the best out of them while bringing in some young talent. The flip of Dylan Raiola, obviously massive in the results it's had this year. I think that might get him an entire grade point up. But then you look at your Cam Linharts, you look at your Prince Wills, you look at your guys, Tommy Hill, able to bring the best out of him. Sia Wright, a transfer coming in this season. Some of the guys in that running back room. You've seen a lot of guys take strides on this football team. The ceiling of this football team, you've seen other coaches in college football in 2 to 3 years take programs from, I don't want to say bottom feeders, but average to college football playoff type contending teams that are contending in the conference. For all I know, that could still happen this year in the new college football. Getting hot in the back half of your schedule could lead you to a college football playoff. That could still be in the cards. I don't think it is this year. I think this talent, particularly Nebraska's offensive line, it's not where it needs to be just yet for Nebraska to be where it wants to be. But I think you have a lot of the pieces. Some of the young offensive linemen, you have your quarterback. The culture is definitely flipped. We're starting to see Nebraska, from a mentality sense, flipping close games. With all that considered, there's been some losses that will stick out. Illinois, Maryland, Wisconsin, Iowa. There's losses through the first 20 months on the job that'll stick with you, that draw things back just a little bit. Not able to make a bowl game in year one. But all things considered, I think you give him a solid B, and a B that can become a B+ depending on what happens next week.
I like the way that you're going with that. I think B is right around the area. I'd give him a B- simply because I think there were games on the table that he should have won that, frankly, he didn't win. The recent Illinois game pops to mind. The Minnesota game at the start of last year, I get it was his first game at the helm. You can kind of give him a pass for that. I don't really. I think you should have your football team ready to go for a week's girl Big Ten matchup. The Michigan State game on the road really sticks out to me. There were a lot of mistakes that were correctable in that game that really let the game slip away from Nebraska. But overall, with the talent accumulation that he's been able to show as a head coach and as a program builder, he's brought in impact transfer guys. Obviously, you mentioned Sierra Wright was a big get in the offseason and a late get, but he's added depth. Stephon Thompson was a big get in the linebacker room and has helped them out in rotational spots. I think the development of John Bullock, going from a fifth-string DB to now one of your mainstays at linebacker, has also been a huge development piece. And I think just the addition of Tony White and getting Tony White in the door and building your defensive scheme and getting guys like John Butler and, allowing Terrence Knighton to work with the D lineman and getting guys like James Williams and getting the most out of Nash Hutmaker and Ty Robinson. I think building the program solidly is what gets him that high. And then the young talent, Ja'Cory Barney, is absolutely electric. Bringing Emma Johnson in to help flesh out your rotational room along with Dante Dowdell, another impact transfer, and building out the offensive line that was one of the weaker points of this Husker team under the tenure of the previous coaching staff. And now you get in experienced guys, well-traveled offensive linemen, and you build out a solid program and make that one of your strengths and get back to the roots of Nebraska football. I think for that, he gets a B- because you can't let certain games get away, especially a ranked one against Illinois at home.
That's 100% fair. What I look at, though, and what I think a lot of Husker fans have reason for optimism moving forward in, and we've kind of discussed this in a roundabout way this week, is the team itself right now is not perfect. There are deficiencies on this team that I think need to be cleaned up if Nebraska wants to be a college football playoff contender. But the foundation's been set, and the foundation that I see is very solid. We talked about this 20 months ago whenever Matt Rhule was first brought on. Like, what is this task for Matt Rhule? He's walking into essentially a home renovation project that you got 70 shag carpet down. The paint is all gross. You got to redo all the floors. Like, there was a lot of tear down that needed to be done before you're able to start building up what you need to do. And it's hard to judge a work that's still in progress. Like, I think what Nebraska has right now, if there's any home builders out there, my dad's a home builder. I kind of grew up around it. You've got the foundation poured. Like, the basement's been dug. You got the foundation poured. I think you have some of the framing done. You're still waiting on drywall. You're waiting on a lot of things. But the framing is starting to go up. It's starting to look like a house. And the house that you see looks good with the pieces that you have in place. I think the offensive line has made massive strides from where it was 20 months ago. The defense as a whole, as you talked about, is a completely different unit than the unit we saw back in 2022. Like, the complete flip that's had with a lot of the same guys has been incredible to see. The quarterback is obviously massive. I mean, you have a quarterback that, and I've talked about this before on the show, is a guy that a lot of coaches around America would be lucky to have. Like, in order to make, in the modern college football, a playoff type run, you got to have a quarterback that you can rely upon. And right now, I think Nebraska has a quarterback that they can rely upon for the rest of this season, plus the next two, maybe a third. I mean, that's what we're talking about with Dylan Riley. This is a guy that, in all likelihood, is probably going to be going off to the NFL after his junior year if he continues to make strides like we've seen with the talent that he already has. Right now, you have a firm foundation in place, solid framing, reason for optimism for the future. And I think Husker fans, there's high expectations around here for good reason, and it's because I think they see the potential, the writing on the wall of what this team can be. And that's why there's such high expectations and why people want to see better special teams play and why that Illinois loss stings so much. That's what you got right now. You're building for the future, but I give Matt Rhule a solid B. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We'll have Mike Babcock join us here after the break. Schmidty joins us a little bit later this hour from Kauffman. Stick with us. It's Hail Varsity.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Rolling through a Wednesday edition here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Elijah Herbel and Justice Rhody taking you through the show today as Schmidty's got the day off. We'll hear from him a little bit later this hour as he's down in Kansas City checking out the Royals and the Yankees in postseason baseball action. We welcome Mike Babcock to the show, Husker historian. Read him with Hail Varsity. And Babbers, it's good to chat with you. You keeping yourself busy during a bye week? I don't know. It's one of those things that you kind of look forward to, and then the bye week comes around and you say, kind of wish there was a football game on Saturday.
It's not the Huskers, so there'll be an opportunity to watch some stuff. That's good. And I got the baseball playoffs. That's good. And, you know, the two newsletter emails, things that I write, I still do those, two of them. So the one good thing is there's no post-game thing that I have to write, so I can just watch the other games on TV. So it's all good.
Yeah, Mike, we'll get into your newsletter from this week. This is a good one from yesterday on the Black 41 Flash Reverse Pass. Black 41 Flash Reverse Pass. I get that right?
Right,
yeah,
you got that right.
We'll get into that here a little bit later, but where I want to start this off with you is with the topic that we led off with to start off the show today, a general bye-week topic of, as you look at the first 18 games of the Matt Rhule tenure at Nebraska, 20 months on the job, what grade do you give Matt Rhule for what he has done so far? Obviously, he hasn't led Nebraska to bowl eligibility yet this year or last season. I think that's a big point that people are going to want to get checked off before they can fully grade what Matt Rhule has done so far. But based on what you've seen up to this point, 5-7 last year, 5-1 to start off the 2024 season, what grade do you give Matt Rhule?
Well, you know, I said that when Justice spoke, then I would agree with him. But in this case, I'm probably not going to B-. I'm going to go higher than that. I would say B+ right now. And the reason I would say that is that I think the important part of what he's done, you referred to, he flipped the culture. I think that's the first most important thing that he did, is he's got the culture going in a different direction. He's very specific about it when he talks to us. And when you talk to the players, you get the impression that what he says to us is accurate. I think that's critical to this program. In order to get it turned around, you've got to get the culture flipped. And I think that he's done that. The reason I don't go any higher than that is, you know, the bottom line is just win. You got to win. And we have to see where that goes. But in terms of the other things, getting a 5-star, and I know that Dylan Raiola had, family connections and everything that went with it, but still getting a 5-star quarterback to come here to set a foundation for your recruiting, because I do think that makes a difference. If you get a 5-star guy like that, then other 5-star players and 4-star players look at that and they're more inclined to give you consideration and maybe come there. I just think that he's done the right things to get the culture flipped, to build a foundation for the program, and I think the wins will come. It's not like a straight line from where it was to where it should be, any more than Tom Osborne's 25 seasons were a straight line to those national championships. There were ups and downs there. And I think it's the same thing here. So there have been some things that you would be concerned about, but I think overall he's done what was expected when he was hired here. And he was hired into a difficult situation, I think.
Mike Babcock with us. Follow him on Twitter at MDBabs. Mike, I got to ask you, the past 3 recruiting cycles, according to 247 Sports, Matt Rhule's been able to keep the #1 player in the state of Nebraska as a Cornhusker. How big is that for establishing a program in state when you keep the #1 guys, the best guys in the state, in the program, and building a pipeline starting from the ground up?
I think that's essential. I think it's much more difficult now than it once was. I mean, that was one of the things that, again, I'm an old guy, so Tom Osborne's basis of recruiting, he almost always got the best in-state players. In a couple of instances, he didn't. A couple of Omaha guys went elsewhere. I think one went to Iowa, and maybe they both did. I don't remember. But keep the best players in-state. And again, it's much more difficult now because of social media and everything that, you can finding somebody that other people don't know much about is really difficult. But I think that's important in building the program. You got to keep the guys in state because, it's not a big population state and you're not in a big population area necessarily. So you got to start at home and you've got to get some guys like Dylan Raiola to show that you can recruit effectively outside of your home state, but start here.
Mike, before we look into the 2024 season specifically, kind of get a report card from you on what we've seen through the first 6, I want to stick with this topic of Matt Rhule's tenure in totality. If you could pick out one thing that, I don't want to say has rubbed you the wrong way, but is your biggest critique of Matt Rhule through the first 18 games on the job, what would you say that critique is? What's keeping, I guess, what he has done so far from being an A? What would you change as you look back at the last 20 months?
Well, the obvious, I think, is the special teams play. I mean, you've not done a good job of getting those things corrected. I mean, you see those things. He talked about turnover margin. That's improved. And that was one of the 3 things that, he wanted to improve on. I just think that the special teams play has just got to get better. And you would expect that because you have a special teams coach devoted to that responsibility. And, now you have more coaches than they've ever had in the past, so guys can work with individuals and so forth. I think that's the one area that I think has to be taken care of if you're going to continue the move up on and become the kind of program that people expect here.
Mike Babcock's with us here. And Mike, as we turn our attention to the 2024 season specifically, want to kind of get a general midseason report card from you. We've talked plenty this week. The special teams needs to be better. You think you're seeing the progress defensively. It seems like Nebraska maybe hasn't turned the corner, but is making some serious progress in terms of being able to go and win close football games. As you look at the first 6 games as a whole, what grade are you giving Nebraska? 5-1, they're 1 game away from bowl eligibility as they're in the bye.
Well, probably a B, because I think that they should have got the Illinois game. That should have been a win. And if you get that, it's an A, obviously, because you're you're undefeated going into a game against an undefeated Indiana team that has really played well, and get the job done. But as I've said constantly on this program, it's got to be one game at a time, and I think they've done a pretty good job of that. They did a pretty good job of setting aside the Illinois game, but if I'm going to evaluate the season up to this point, I do think that this team could be 6-0 and should have had that Illinois win.
Mike, to kind of piggyback on that, have your expectations for the last 6 games changed based on what you've seen through the first 6? What are you expecting from this Husker team through the closing stretch of their season?
I'm really one game at a time. I want to see what happens against Indiana. That's the thing. Can you win the Indiana game and become bowl eligible? And then, you've got Ohio State. I don't expect that to be a win, but let's see what happens against Indiana first, and then let's move to that. And then if you play well against Ohio State, even if you don't win the game, if you're competitive against Ohio State, then that changes, or that applies to what you expect to happen down the line after that game. But for me right now, it's Indiana. What can Nebraska do against Indiana? If it can beat Indiana, at that point, I think it's moving closer to an A. And I don't think Nebraska has to beat Ohio State to get it to be an A, but I think you have to be competitive there. But you got to beat Indiana first.
Mike, I wanted to switch gears here and ask you. You dropped a piece on Hail Varsity Digest yesterday about Black 41 flash reverse pass. Take us back to that moment, 2001. Thunder Collins in the I-back gets the sweep. He pitches it back to Mike Stunts, and then, whoa, Eric Crouch out of the backfield, 63-yard touchdown. Hello, Oklahoma. Didn't see that one coming. Take us back to that moment. What was it like living in that? Where were you situated during that? How big was that in the moment to get a big-time play against a really, really good Oklahoma team?
Well, I'm up in the press box. I've seen some, I saw the Fumble-Rooski under Osborne and some of these kind of plays, the Bounce-a-Rooski under Osborne. So it was a Frank Solich moment doing the same kind of thing. It was, the thing is, of course, Mike Stunts was recruited as a quarterback, so you knew he could throw the ball. It's all about timing. The thing I look at with that play is the big picture. That was kind of the signature moment, I guess, in Husker history because of the trickery or whatever. It goes down that way, but it was against Oklahoma. That was the other thing that underscored it. You probably understand that, but it was against Oklahoma. That was the big thing. Big rival, get it done against Oklahoma and win that game, and that was significant from that standpoint, I guess.
Justice, the Oklahoma native, probably understands that more than most. Yeah. Mike, quickly, what inspired that story this week? It's always been in my mind, and I thought, for an off week when I'm not doing a story about a game between Nebraska and Saturday's opponent because they have an off week, what would be a good one to recall? And I thought, that was one. People, it's easy to just go to YouTube and just look at it. You can watch it. There's no question about that. But just the specifics of it, the fact that Stunts was a quarterback, recruited as quarterback, all those things just kind of fell into place, I thought. So let's tell this story. Find him on Twitter at MDBabs. Get his newsletter, Mike B at HurrdatSports.com. Mike, quickly here, 15 seconds. What's coming up from you?
Did something on James Williams, kind of recap the week for James Williams, some of the things that were said about him and, what he's done. He and Ty Robinson have 40% of Nebraska sacks this year. So,
well, that'll be good, Mike. We'll get caught up with you next week. Appreciate you hopping on with us today.
Thanks, guys.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back in on a Wednesday here, it's Hail Varsity Radio. Elijah Herbel and Justice Rhody taking you through this midweek edition, and we're excited to welcome in the man, the myth, the legend, Chris Schmidt from Kauffman Stadium. And Schmidty, we got a question in from the StreamYard. Tiger Shark Diver wants to know, is that Italian linen you're wearing to play off baseball today?
Am I wearing Italian linen? No, I'm right by the left field foul pole. My wife's like, where are you? I'm not in the beer garden, honestly. I'm just hanging out. Carson and his cousin Chandler. We got in here about 45 minutes ago for batting practice. Aaron Judge put on a monstrous display, and his cousin Chan got a ball tossed to him by Juan Soto. So the early appointment paid off, but no, it's the golf shirt, Tiger Shark Diver. But thank you for the fashion question. How are you guys doing, man? I'm about ready to fall asleep before I get about a 6-gallon cup of coffee. I had too much barbecue for lunch. A little food coma, but man, the juice is very real here at Kauffman. Game 3 Yankees and Royals, two bitter rivals from back in the 70s and early 80s, and it's fun, man. All sorts of Royals fans in the parking lot. They fired up the barbecue. There's a few side-eyed looks at my family for all their Yankee gear. I didn't step up to protect them. I just kind of let it happen. Let the hazing begin.
And you texted me, Schmidt, you had some family members trying to get a date with Aaron Judge?
Well, whatever works, right? I'll say this. Mama and Junior did not splurge on seats for Papa Al. It is very high probability of getting a foul ball or 7. We're along the first base line for Game 3 tonight. So this is pretty cool. I've been to a lot of baseball games. I think we all have as kids coming down to Kauffman, checking out the Royals. But this is the first time I've ever, been to a playoff game. So I'm pretty excited about the opportunity and the event tonight, and it should be just incredible.
You talk about the fact that you're in foul ball territory. We need your opinion. As an adult, is it okay to bring a baseball glove to a game if you're in foul ball territory?
No. It stops when you're about 12. Carson didn't bring his glove. Chandler, I think, forgot his glove, but it worked out. The kid to adult ratio was absolutely awful along the left field. A lot of dudes in Mantle and Judge jerseys and Witt jerseys, which is cool, but they were outnumbering the kids, and it looked like a Bob Knight rebounding drill every time a ball was tossed into foul territory by one of the players taken outfield. So let the little ones get all the foul balls and enjoyment. Don't rush to eBay the second some major leaguer throws you a ball.
Schmidty, I gotta ask you, you're down in Kauffman. You've already indulged in the Kansas City barbecue. When we hit about the 6th inning, is it ballpark dog time? What are we looking at over-under here food-wise?
You know, I think a beer and a dog is a mandatory thing. So I just don't know when I'm going to get that beer and that dog. But it'll happen tonight. It'll absolutely happen. I've already been told it's tradition every time we come to Kansas City. I buy Junior one of those damn, frozen fruit sticks that are $7,000. The frozen strawberries with a drizzle of chocolate on top of it. It's, extra. So he's going to get his frozen strawberry stick. I've got a picture of him pre-steroid injections back when he was 15. I shouldn't say 15. Back in 2015, we were here together. So we'll do the then and now picture at some point. But no, him and Mom will get the frozen strawberry stick, and I'll do a beer and a dog for sure.
Have you considered 9 beers and 9 dogs in 9 innings?
I can't do it. I had what was deemed just 4 ribs, 4 bones, but they were St. Louis style, so they were Fred Flintstone portion size. And I might not eat for a week. It was so full. I had some baked beans and also some jalapeno slaw and a Coke. It was good. It was outstanding.
Schmidty, I got to ask you, if the Royals pull one out tonight against the Yankees, get a big win, are we going to see Chris Schmidt on national television tearing the shirt off in celebration? That's what I got to know.
See, I don't think so. The guy on the hill tonight for the Yankees is Clark Schmidt. But there is a C. Schmidt on the mound tonight, but it's for New York. He's 3-3. There's not a lot of fandom in the car ride down with the Yankee fans I was around that he was throwing tonight. So, no, I just want to see a memorable ball game for the kidney I donated to get in there.
Schmitty, before we get you out of here, we appreciate you hopping on. Do you have a score prediction? Have you gone down to the sports book and laid some heat? What happens tonight with your expert eyes?
I think the Yankees lose a heartbreaker tonight. I think the Yankees bounce back tonight. I think this thing goes far.
Okay, and the last thought is there's been questions here around the station this afternoon. The people are wondering if you're going to be back in for work tomorrow morning bright and early.
I am, because I have, as our folks on Hail Varsity YouTube can see, I've got memorabilia to deliver. The one Will Wilson.
Is it signed?
It's not signed by anybody, but I can forge something. Who should we? Hey, ran into our buddy George Brett. Should we just sign a George Brett and say, George wanted to say, hi, Will, this is for you?
It'd be really funny if you forged a Yankee signature on there. Alex Rodriguez actually signed this Royals towel for you, Will.
Oh, it reminds me of a story of a friend who came down here for a Yankees-Royals game. This was when Dion was playing. Coach Prime was playing for the Yankees, I think late 80s, early 90s. So him and Bo Jackson would always go back and forth. But Dion in the outfield would sign baseballs for kids and throw them into the stands. But my buddy got a signed ball from Dion, and it was signed Elvis. It wasn't signed Prime. It was signed Elvis by Coach Prime. So that was his fun way to get back at the Kansas City Kings.
Schmidt, should we be watching for you on TV tonight? Where are the seats at?
We're fifth row, first base line.
The first base side, fifth row.
Yes, I believe section R or T.
Okay.
So, again, I told you we donated kidneys to get in here.
Well, one final 360 before we let you go, Schmitty. Give us the atmosphere. Look at that.
For all the jealous people at home.
Schmitty, he sold a kidney to get in there, and that is a beautiful view for playoff baseball. Schmitty, appreciate you hopping on with us.
I sold her kidney.
Maybe she'll get a date with Aaron Judge out of it. Well,
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah, Schmitty, thanks for hopping on. Enjoy the game. We'll talk to you tomorrow. There he is, Chris Schmidt from Kauffman Stadium, as he's going to be out checking out some playoff baseball, enjoying the bye week better than myself. As that should be a fantastic ball game tonight. We'll be watching along. We'll be looking for Schmitty. I'm hoping if I see Schmitty, I get a picture of him on TV and get that tweeted out. But that is Chris Schmidt joining us from Kauffman Stadium ahead of Yankees and Royals. It's a Wednesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. We'll wrap up Hour 1 and get you into Evan Bland in Hour 2. That's after the break right here with Hail Varsity.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Wrapping up Hour 1 here at Hail Varsity Radio. We are brought to you by Hurrdat Sports. Elijah Herbel and Justice Rhody taking you through the show today as we wrap up Hour 1 and get you into Evan Bland for your Hour 2. As Evan joining us in the Omaha World Herald, as he always does on Wednesdays. So looking forward to getting caught up with Evan. We'll get his thoughts on the first 18 games of the Matt Rhule tenure. That's the topic we started off this show with today. What grade do you give Matt Rhule for his first 18 games on the job? If you have thoughts, you can let us know. The Hail Varsity YouTube page. Hop into the live chat there and let us know what you think. You can also give us a call, 402-489-2060. 1240. Again, 402-489-1240 is the number you call to give us your thoughts. What grade do you give Matt Rhule for his first 18 games on the job? We'll also get our Big Ten power rankings. We talked about this a little bit yesterday with Big Ten parity, college football parity. I know Justice, he watches all the games on Saturday. He has his Big Ten power rankings. I have mine somewhat fleshed out, because to me it's more about tiers. What tier do you put every single team in, as opposed to like who's 12 and who's 14. The difference can be somewhat minimal. So we'll get into that in hour 2 as well. And then we'll also get caught up. A Jock Doc Wednesday, Dr. Brandon Seifert joins us from Nebraska Orthopedic, as we'll get a report on the Rashee Rice knee injury. A reminder that Big Brothers Big Sisters is on a mission to recruit 60 men in 60 days by October 30th. They're calling on men in the Omaha metro area to step up and become big brothers to the many youths that are currently waiting for a mentor. Some of these kids have been waiting for over a year for a big brother, and more than half of those on the waiting list are boys. Big Brother Big Sisters takes great care in matching each big and little, considering numerous factors to create strong, lasting connections. And once matched, every pair receives ongoing support from a dedicated match support specialist, ensuring they have the correct guidance, training, and coaching that they need. If you're interested in this, you can make a difference by becoming a mentor. Visit mentoromaha.org today to sign up. Again, 60 men in 60 days is the mission by October 30th. So if that sounds of interest to you, become a big brother today. And if you're on the fence, go check out our interview. You can find it in podcast form, as we had Jake Potoff. He jumped on with us. A fellow Lincoln Southeast grad is Jake, and he's currently a big brother up in the Omaha metro right now. Kind of gave us the lowdown on what that experience is like. So we encourage you to go check out that interview in podcast form as well. Justice, a hour 1 that has absolutely flown by. It's your debut in Big Boy Radio as a co-host. We've given Matt Rhule a grade. Give yourself a grade on your day 1 performance.
I give myself a below average C-. I've got to get in and out of breaks smoothly. People are asking me questions. They're saying I should type back to them. They want me to type back to them. It's just I gotta get the hang of this and make some more concise questioning and try not to break.
You're being way too harsh on yourself. I was sitting here setting yourself up for an A.
I'm a self-critic till the day I die.
I was setting you up for an A, but okay. If you want to give yourself a harsh grade, I think the people at home will all give you an A. It's a great hour 1 performance as Justice Rhody makes his co-hosting debut here on Hail Varsity Radio. The Oklahoma kid. He's gotten the board down, the production side of things down. He's on the mic now, and we're happy to have Justice Rhody with us on a day that Chris Schmidt finds himself out at Kauffman Stadium for playoff baseball as Schmidty enjoys his bye week. Right. Again, plenty coming your way here in hour 2, as we'll be kicking off hour 2 with Evan Bland. That's coming your way here in about 5 minutes. Evan with the Omaha World Herald makes his Wednesday usual appearance. We'll also have another Jock Doc Wednesday. Dr. Brandon Seifert joins us to talk Rashee Rice, I should say. All of that coming your way in hour 2. It is Hail Varsity Radio.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Roll into hour 2 here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Elijah Herbel and Justice Rhody taking you through as Schmidty's got the afternoon off. He's out in Kansas City getting all set to watch the Yanks take on the Royals. Got a picture from his seats, and yeah, he definitely did donate a kidney for those seats. A beautiful view of the foul pole. He's right there in right field. Beautiful view of home plate. Beautiful view of the game. It's fantastic. Good for Schmidty. He deserves it, as we welcome Evan Bland into the show here. Evan's usual Wednesday appearance. And Evan, it's good to chat with you. Good to get caught up with you on a Wednesday. How are you keeping yourself busy during a Husker bye week? Because as this week goes on, I'm just sitting here like, man, I can't believe it's still 10 days till another Husker football game. Like, the bye week sounds nice until you get there, and then you're like, well, I kind of like having football on Saturday, actually. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I love the fact that there's a bye right at the midway point of the season. Like, it provides a really kind of neat opportunity to look at the first half and to assess the second half and look at trends. And, I did a kind of a deeper dive on the penalty situation this week. Like, that's not the kind of thing you necessarily do when an opponent's a couple of days away. So I don't know. Like, I look at the games this weekend and say, I'm looking forward to watching some college football and just kind of hanging out and being a fan of the sport. So I think that part will be fun. And, it's good pumpkin patch weather. It's a good chance to get outside, do whatever, and then lock back in for what should be a pretty fun second half of the year.
What games are you circling on Saturday?
I honestly haven't looked at the full lineup today, but I'll be an 11A to 11P kind of guy, checking in and out, of course, on some different situations. Honestly, it doesn't matter to me. Like, I'm going to enjoy watching football. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
See, I'm looking at it. The schedule, you got Washington and Iowa, 11 a.m. Should be an all right game. The West Coast teams have struggled to come to the Midwest and play football, so we'll see how that goes. Then you got Oklahoma, Texas at 2:30, along with Penn State and USC at 2:30. And then two great evening games with Ohio State taking on Oregon at 6:30, along with Ole Miss taking on LSU at 6:30. So you got a full slate of college football games. It's not the worst weekend in the world for Nebraska to have a bye week.
No, it's not. And I remember thinking about that when the schedule came out, and it was like, oh, what's that slate look like on that week? And it's pretty darn good. I mean, all those games that you laid out there. I mean, Washington, Iowa was interesting. Texas, Oklahoma is always a fascinating game. Like, I think Texas is a lot better, but that game always seems to even out. It really doesn't matter kind of how good either team is necessarily. So, I think if you're a Husker fan and your team's 5-1 and potentially on the verge of being ranked, if a couple things go your way, like, what better time to just kind of sit back and enjoy some good tight games and not have the stress about worrying about how your team does.
Evan, the topic of today has been, as we're 18 games into the Matt Rhule era here at Nebraska, what is your report card? What grade would you give Matt Rhule? He's gotten through the initial test, but what grade would you give him if you're the one pen in the paper?
I'd go, I think, B plus probably for the first half of the year. I mean, there was a lot of talk about Nebraska being undefeated going to Ohio State, and I don't know how realistic that ever was. But look around the country, and there's not a lot of teams that are 5-1. I think a lot of places would be pretty happy with that record, and Nebraska learned its lesson against Illinois in overtime. But I think they applied it pretty well in the second half against Purdue and then against Rutgers in sort of a Big Ten-style win. They got the Colorado victory. And it hasn't always been perfect, right? I mean, we could talk about special teams or running the ball or, a couple of games where maybe the tackling wasn't the best. But, by and large, Nebraska has a dominant defense. They have a quarterback and skill position players that you feel pretty good about. They have a punter who's been a playmaker, and they've won a one-score game and have a little bit of confidence going into the bye week. So that hasn't been the case in a while, and now you're going to get an opportunity, in a week to break a couple long streaks. One, you've got, if they were to win in Indiana, that would end the bowl drought, which is something obviously that's been on people's minds for a long time, and it would end the top 25 drought as well. So there's a lot still in front of this team, but I think, you win 5 or 6 games, style points aren't really all that relevant in the conversation, especially for where Nebraska is as a program. So I think the program is in a good spot. People are excited about it, and they should have plenty of confidence and momentum here for the second half.
Evan Bland is with us here from the Omaha World Herald. And Evan, as you look back to where we were in late December of, do some quick math here, 2022, when Matt Rhule first took the job at Nebraska, if you were to tell yourself or the average Husker fan, hey, when Nebraska gets to their bye week in week 7 of 2024, Nebraska would be at 5-1, no other context. Do you think Matt Rhule has lived up to the expectations that Husker fans had for him whenever he first took the job thus far? And I know the story really can't be told until the end of the season, but 5-1 at the bye, all things considered, kind of feels like a win to me.
I think that's fair. You looked at Matt Rhule's track record elsewhere. There were poor year ones as he was taking over at programs that were bottoming out. Year 2 was a 500 type of year, and then year 3 was when they took off. And so by that standard, Nebraska at this point at least appears to be ahead of the game there. And I think you have to factor in just the ability to flip a roster so much quicker now than you could when he was at Temple and Baylor too, through the portal and through NIL, and Nebraska just having more resources than what Rhule had at those previous stops. So I think that part would be realistic. I'm sure people would be curious to know what those 5 wins looked like and who they came against. But, again, if you're a team that hasn't been to a bowl game since 2016 and you have this abysmal track record in one-score games, like just finding a way to win, having some sort of identity on either side of the ball, something you can hang your hat on, would be progress. And I think individually, too, you can point to a lot of things that are exciting, whether you want to talk about, the emergence of Sear Wright as a corner, or John Bullock as a 6th-year guy who has come back, changed positions, and is putting himself on pro radars, or, the defensive line. Like, there are just a lot of things, I think, from a micro view that have been pretty exciting and encouraging for Nebraska, too. But I think, in the big picture, just when you start talking about kind of the timeline to go from struggling to being a contender, I think Nebraska, again, at this point, with 6 more regular season games to play, is ahead of schedule.
Evan, I wanted to ask you a quick question here. You talked about hanging your hat in an identity and the identity in this Nebraska team. One of the things that Matt Rhule wanted to change coming in was the special teams play, and the special teams part of the identity. And you recently posted a recap of the Rutgers game talking about some of the special teams mishaps and errors. Do you think that's been one of the big down points, one of the reasons why Matt Rhule doesn't have an A grade in terms of where you give him that B grade? Is that one of the big mishaps that's been the part of the Matt Rhule tenure?
To this point, yeah. I mean, you look at the one loss that they had, and they missed the field goal late that would have put them up against Illinois. I'm not sure Illinois scores. I mean, who knows how that fourth quarter would have turned out. There were a lot of penalties in that game, too. I think that's the other thing that they sort of lament from that loss, was a lot of the 15-yarders and pre-snap stuff that cost them. But largely, to this point, other than that game, those special teams struggles haven't cost them. I mean, Matt Rhule said Monday, the idea that you can have 2 punts blocked the way they did against Rutgers and still win the game is almost impossible to do. And they still figured out a way. I mean, kind of the same thing against Purdue, when you have 2 field goal snaps into the turf that lead to blocks, and you miss another kick with your number 2 kicker, and your starter's been out all year. Like, there's just some things they're working through. Now, I would say they've shown improvement in other areas. I think their kick coverage and their punt coverage or punt return game has been better as they've gone along. Brian Buschini has been as consistent as he's ever been as a Husker punter. And so, there are some good things going there. But certainly you got to figure out a way to gain some confidence in kicking the ball for 3 points. I mean, the Big Ten is just too tight. It's too tough. The margin for error is too small for you to feel like you can get away with missing, anything from inside 40 and not have it cost you the game. So this week will be a good sort of healing week. I think it's a good self-assessment week for that unit, especially in the punt game, and kind of figuring out schematically what's gone wrong with some of the blocks that they've had. But yeah, there's no doubt that's a unit that remains a work in progress, and maybe some of that's things that can't be cleared up until they can change personnel in the off season, add some specialists or whatever else it might be. But they've done it in practice. A lot of what this team's struggles have been have been on the mental side. So maybe this is that stretch now where they can start converting good practice disciplines into the game.
It's Evan Bland with us here. And Evan, as you look at the first 6 games on the slate, a lot of the things that Husker fans have brought up being areas of concern. You laid out one with the special teams. I think another one that has been discussed plenty, especially within the past week, has been the conservative nature of Nebraska's offense in the second half and just their apparent struggles to put the football into the end zone after halftime. I think you can also look at the running back rotation, it's still a little bit unclear if Nebraska has a number one guy at running back. And just as you generally look at the first 6 games of the season where Nebraska needs some improvement through the bye, which of those things do you worry could come back to bite Nebraska, considering the 6 teams that they still face this season?
I mean, I think it's probably, can Nebraska generate some explosive run plays? I think they are committing to it more. Certainly in the Rutgers game, even though it wasn't all that effective in terms of yardage, it did kill clock and limit what Rutgers was able to do, and probably cut down on a possession or 2 that they would have had to potentially tie that game. But I think and Matt Rhule said that on Monday too, like you're waiting for some of those 3 and 5 yard runs to turn into 15 or 20, or some kind of a home run play where you make a guy miss and you take it to the house. Like, we just haven't seen that to this point. I think Nebraska has some tough guys. I mean, Dowdell's a tough runner. Gabe Irvin's a tough runner. Emmett Johnson can make some guys miss, but they just don't collectively seem to have that guy who has a little bit of it all, who is that home run sort of threat for them. So that to me is probably the thing that you're looking at. The second half stuff, I don't know. It doesn't worry me all that much. I think about the Colorado game, and they were up 28-0 at half, and they put in a lot of backups and reserves for the last quarter and a half of that game. You look at the Purdue game, and it was the first half that was slow, and they were able to pound the rock and sort of exert their will in the second half. So they did it there. And then, like I said, the Rutgers game, that was managed like a Big Ten football game where you're looking at clock, the elements were a factor. I think as much as that was probably the worst game that Dylan Raiola's played, I think it also showed that it's a pretty high floor. And again, you have to factor in the elements into what went into that too pretty well. So to me, it comes down to, can you get some kind of a spark with the running game? Yeah, you can maybe get 3 and 4 yards when you need, and that's progress. But when you're looking for an explosive play, it can't be Dylan Raiola dropping back and throwing a deep ball every time. I think sometimes you have to get one of those surprise bursts from someone on a handoff.
Evan, I want to do a little bit of compare and contrast here as we have about 3 minutes left, two and a half here. I want to do a compare and contrast from last year. We talk about last year's team where they didn't have a level of dynamism with a 5-star quarterback in Dylan Raiola and some of the weapons they have on the outside with Banks and Naor and Barney, and Lloyd's now starting to hit his stride as we get to the midway towards the later portion of the season. Do you think that this has been a refreshing change for Matt Rhule to keep guys in state, to bring in dynamic, explosive talent through recruiting, through the transfer portal? Where do you see the direction of this program? Do you think that it's been a good change to bring in this fresh talent from Miami, keep guys in state? Do you think Matt Rhule's moving in the right direction?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the offensive side of the ball in particular has borne that out pretty quickly. I mean, a year ago at this time, Nebraska's running the option play and running the quarterback and really trying to do whatever it can to move the ball and generate points. And so, like, you look around the offense now, you've got a true freshman at quarterback. You kind of laid out the 2 senior transfer receivers and Naor and Banks. You've got Dowdell back there, the Oregon transfer, who's become a starter. Corey Barney, who's being used in very creative and unique ways on sweeps and short passes and things like that. So, yeah, there's no doubt that they brought in talent. What they did with that class is what any first-year coaching staff does. They sell you on vision and being able to play right away and executing that vision. And I think largely we've seen that happen. And so I've thought, since we got to know Matt Rhule, that one of the strengths of Nebraska's program was going to be player retention in the portal era. And that's proven to be true in this last cycle, certainly. I mean, Nebraska, I think, lost maybe 8 players to the portal, which is way below the national average. But it's going to be interesting this next year. I mean, a lot of the defenders are moving on. They're older. It's an older unit. Most of Nebraska's offensive line will move on. Obviously, that's a pretty old group, too. So, yeah, I think Nebraska is going to continue to hit the portal when it can, recruit heavily in-state, develop where you can, pick your spots with being creative and adding to the roster elsewhere. But I think Nebraska has proven, and we've seen this with guys like James Williams, who's been a camp addition and has been pretty good on the D-line. Like, they're not afraid to look in unorthodox places or use unconventional methods to bring in talent, because I think they have a pretty good eye for it.
It's Evan Bland with us here. Evan, thanks for the time today. We'll get caught up with you next week, all right?
Thanks, guys.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Hail Varsity Radio here with you on a Wednesday. Elijah Herbel and Justice Rhody were filling in for Chris Schmidt as he's down in Kansas City watching the Royals take on the Yankees in postseason baseball action. We'll have Schmidty back tomorrow. I confirmed with him live whenever he checked in that he will be back in for his morning show for the local listeners on KFOR before he's back in. Tomorrow afternoon, we'll get a report on the game. Hail Varsity Radio, 4 to 6 tomorrow. It's in Lincoln, that's in Omaha, it's in Columbus, that's in the Tri-Cities. Wherever you hear Hail Varsity Radio, the podcast form, so many places for you to check us out. So we'll have Schmidty back in studio tomorrow afternoon as he makes the trek back. He'll probably be operating on very little sleep, but that's why we give a hat tip to Chris Schmidt, the true professional in the radio industry. So we're going to act like it's for work. The reason why he's down, like he's down there, he's covering the Royals and the Yankees.
It's related to sports. It's regional sports coverage.
Well, like let's be honest. Whenever I take any trips anywhere, it is almost always related to a sporting event. Like, I'm not the type of guy to go kick my feet up on a beach somewhere, like during a bye week. Like, no. If I'm gonna go somewhere, I'm going for an event, and 9 times out of 10, it's for a sporting event because that's just who I am. So even whenever I am not on the clock here, it's always sports related. Like, I think back to the vacations that I've taken. Didn't necessarily make it to the Fiesta Bowl last year, but I was down in Arizona and had tickets for the Fiesta Bowl. The New Year's celebrations went a little over the top, and you wake up and the game's about to start and you go, whoops. So there was that one. That was a waste of money.
So if I see you randomly in a bar in Altoona, Georgia, I'll say it's for work, right?
You'll never see me randomly in a bar in Altoona, Georgia,
I don't know. You never know the places that life takes you now.
Well, I had an invite. So for Nebraska's second bye week, I still have an invite down to Athens, Georgia to go watch the Georgia Bulldogs take on, I think it's Mississippi State at home. So considering doing that, you do worry about the drivers down in Athens, Georgia. So that's a bit
Traffic gets a little crazy down there.
That it does. So that's a possibility. I mean, I made it to UFC. I'm trying to think of the last trip I took that was not sports related at all. And it's, oh man, might have been my senior year of high school. I guess I went to go visit friends during college, but we'd always go check out a sporting event while we're there. Yeah, that's kind of sad to think about. I don't think I've taken a trip that wasn't sports related in forever.
Well, speaking of sports-related, Elijah, I think it's time to get to the much-anticipated Big Ten Power Rankings.
Justice says, shut up, Elijah. Nobody cares about your vacationing tendencies.
We can wax poetic about vacations, but it's back to business, baby.
Can you tell where my mind is? My mind is like, why am I in Lincoln on a bye week instead of at Kauffman Stadium watching the Royals take on the Yankees? But
your mind's in Margaritaville. That's where it is.
But to Big Ten Power Rankings we go, as it's a nice chance to take a step back and... Oh, wait, we have a comment in from Justin asking, didn't I go camping this summer, Elijah? That barely counts as a trip. That's not like a vacation. That's like
the wild wilderness.
That's like going out on a Saturday night and going camping. I guess that counts. Sure, Justin. You know what? You've proven me wrong. Thank you. Hat tip to you, sir. We move to sports, though, and as we take a step back from Husker football and take a look at the Big Ten as a whole, I think it's a good chance for us to lay out our Big Ten power rankings for the season. Depending on who you ask on this, I think the power rankings can vary greatly. I saw a list earlier today that had Nebraska ranked number 4 in the Big Ten power rankings, which I personally think is a little bit high, but I understand the argument that you make because aside from Ohio State and Oregon, it's anyone's guess who is like 4 through 10. I think there's a lot of people that have Penn State 3, and I'd probably agree with that as of right now, but 4 through 10 is the wild, wild west, so it's a chance for us to sit down and lay out our Big Ten power rankings, have the people call us dumb. You're probably right. We don't know what the hell we're talking about. So let's dive in. Justice, I assume number 1, number 2 is Ohio State, Oregon.
Yes, you would be correct in that assumption.
Do you go 1A, 1B with Ohio State and Oregon? Or
no, I think Ohio State is a clear number 1 over Oregon. Oregon struggled with some teams that, frankly, I think for all the preseason hype they had, the guys that they brought in the transfer portal, the guy who they have at quarterback, and who they have at head coach, I think they should be dispatching of these teams. And they've been in some ball games with some teams, frankly, I think they're far superior then.
I mean, it's a team that I frankly look at it, and if they get past Oregon, it's going to be a tough road test to go on the road, go to Eugene, go get a victory. I think they do it. We'll see what happens on Saturday. But if they win that game, to me, it's looking likely to me that Ohio State runs the table this year. And I do think legitimately, we kind of talked about this yesterday, Nebraska, I'm not going to say could beat them. I think stylistically could be a decent matchup for Ohio State, but I think the talent that they have all across the field just sets them apart far and away. Every win they've had this year has been impressive. So
they are so loaded, dude. Yeah. They are so loaded in every position group. Their running back room, they got the best running back in the SEC to come and be the backup. That should tell you the depth of talent they have.
So Ohio State number 1, both Justice and I's power rankings. As we power rank the Big Ten, I think we both have Oregon at 2.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not much to say about Oregon. They've been solid. Have they been spectacular? No. There were some early season games where they were definitely getting their feet wet, figuring out the offense with Dylan Gabriel. I think they've started to hit their stride. Again, I am not convinced they're good enough to take down Ohio State on Saturday, but that's the next big litmus test in terms of who's going to be number 1, who's going to be number 2, because I think we're going to see these teams match up again in December. That's your likely Big Ten title game, Ohio State and Oregon, because, again, I think there's a pretty wide gap between those two and the rest of the conference.
For sure.
The stopgap between those two, I think you and I are going to be in agreement here. Penn State.
I put Penn State at 3, yes.
Yeah, Penn State is what kind of bridges the difference between 2 and 4. I do think that there is a pretty wide gap between 2 and 3, but I think there's a pretty wide gap between 3 and 4 as well. So
yes.
Put Penn State in at 3. They're solid everywhere. They're not spectacular anywhere. Fair?
Fair. I think that their defense is better than their offense marginally. I think Abdul Carter's an absolute game wrecker on the defensive line. Offensively, I think it's really Drew Aller, Nick Singleton, and then a bunch of guys that are solid but not national contender worthy, if that makes sense.
So we're in agreement there. Love their offensive line. Love the physicality they play with. I don't think it's a team that goes in and competes for a national championship this year, but it's a team that, if things break their way late in the season, could be playing in a Big Ten title game. That's why I have them at 3.
For sure.
This is where things get interesting, Justice. Who do you put into number 4 on your Big Ten power rankings? Number 4. And is it Indiana?
I went with a different team. A different team.
You went Iowa.
I went Illinois.
Illinois, okay.
I went Illinois at number 4. I think they're, a 2-touchdown gap between them and Penn State, but I think if Illinois and Indiana matched up on a neutral field right now, I think Illinois plays a style of ball that could ball control, that could limit what Indiana wants to do offensively. They could be physical. They can run the ball. They have big receivers on the outside. I think on a neutral field in a head-to-head scenario, I'd give the edge to Illinois, so that's why I put them at number 4.
I see that. That's a fair place to put them. We do have a caller coming in, so we'll field that real fast. Whenever I look at number 4, to me, and this is recency bias, I go the Indiana Hoosiers, believe it or not.
Radio, who am I speaking with?
Justice, your mic is on? There we go. I put Indiana in at number 4. They're undefeated. They've passed all the tests with flying colors thus far. I don't think they've really been tested as a football team. Nebraska is going to provide a fantastic test to them. I go Indiana at number 4, and then I think I put Illinois in at number 5. Illinois didn't look great against Penn State. That being said, we have Penn State at number 3 in the power rankings for a reason. They're a really, really solid football team. A team that has to bring it against these mid-tier type opponents in the conference. They did that against Illinois. So I go Indiana 4 and then Illinois number 5. Who do we go with on the phone lines here, Justice?
Oh, we have Doug on the phone lines here. Wants to talk a little bit about the Black 41 flash reverse pass.
Okay, we can take a little break from power rankings. We go to Doug. Doug, what do you have for us?
Well, the irony to that whole thing is going to the same end zone a quarter before that, Oklahoma tried a similar pass. Their quarterback handed up, broke down the middle, and was wide open, and they overthrew him. So you never would think you would see that again, and now you see it a quarter later for a touchdown.
You see, and I've seen that on the YouTube story because the TV broadcast kind of talks about it a little bit after the play where they were watching practice on Friday and both of these teams had similar plays and they were surprised to see both. But that can be the difference in those tight football games. It simply comes down to execution.
Absolutely the difference, and he was not nearly as agile as Crouch was, and he stumbled all over himself, and they overthrew him.
Well, Doug, thanks for the phone call today. It was a good little feature from Mike Babcock. Encourage everyone to go check it out. Have you checked out the piece just yet, Doug?
I have not, but I'm going to go read it.
Go check it out. It's in the Hail Varsity Digest. You can look it up on hurrdatsports.com as Mike kind of tells the story of that Black 41 flash reverse. Doug, thanks for the phone call today.
Thanks.
So that's Doug, Black 41 flash reverse. I know he'll like that story. Go check it out. Mike Babcock's work with Hurrdat Sports and Hail Varsity, the Hail Varsity Digest. You can just search it up, though. Google search Mike Babcock. Top result is going to be his Hail Varsity Digest from yesterday. So
if you don't get the hockey coach.
Okay. So, Justice, as we get back to the Big Ten power rankings here, I have Indiana at number 4, Illinois at number 5. Do you have Indiana coming at number 5? Are we close there?
I do have Indiana at number 5 because I think they have an explosive offense. I think Coach Sig has really flipped the culture there. I got Indiana at 5. I think they're a clear step above. They're going to play number 6 soon, but I think they've shown just enough offensively to be the slight step above number 6.
Who do you throw in to number 6?
I have the hometown Huskers at number 6. I think that's the sweet spot for them because the teams I have after them, I think that they're better than, and that they've beaten a team behind them already. So I think that's a fair spot to put them in 6.
Believe it or not, I throw the Washington Huskies in at number 6. They've impressed me. I enjoyed the win over Michigan. The big question with them is how are they going to be able to handle the physicality along the lines of scrimmage because they had some talent. Will Rogers, their quarterback, fantastic. We watched him for years with the Pirate at Mississippi State. I throw in the Washington Huskies in at number 6. I go Michigan at 7.
I go Rutgers at 7.
Okay.
I knock Michigan a little bit for losing on the road and not having a real quarterback. If you have 3 quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback.
That's fair. I still think that Michigan's rushing attack is the best in the Big Ten. You need to have a passing game if you want to be successful in modern college football. Ask the Iowa Hawkeyes. But they have a really, really good rushing attack that's going to keep them in every single game along with a super solid defense. So I go Michigan at 7, and then I kind of have Nebraska tied with Michigan at number 7. That's about where I throw the Huskers in. So it's kind of a tie 7A, 7B. I have Michigan and Nebraska, and then I have Rutgers following them.
I have, to round it out, I go Washington at 8. I give Michigan at 9. I value head-to-head wins here, and I think Nebraska beating Rutgers, Rutgers beating Washington, Washington beating Michigan. I think it made sense for all of those to fall in line. Valuing head-to-head. I
go USC at 9, Rutgers at 10.
Okay.
The Minnesota Golden Gophers at 11. 12, I have Wisconsin. 13 is Maryland. 14, Michigan State. I think I've missed a team on my rankings here, but whatever. Rounding it out at the bottom, Northwestern, UCLA, and Purdue are your bottom 3.
I went USC at 10, Iowa at 11, Wisconsin at 12, Minnesota at 13, Michigan State 14, Maryland 15, Northwestern 16, and then UCLA and Purdue round out the bottom 2.
I forgot about Iowa, didn't I? That's fair. That's fine. We don't need Iowa in these power rankings anyway. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Those are our Big Ten power rankings. How to put it concisely, it's your 2 at the top, Ohio State and Oregon. It's your 3 at the bottom, UCLA, Northwestern, and Purdue. I think you have the bottom tier in the middle, which is like your Maryland and your Michigan State and your Wisconsin, and then it's everybody else. It's a week-to-week kind of thing with all those other teams. It's Hail Varsity Radio rolling through a Wednesday. We'll get caught up with Dr. Brandon Seifert. A Jock Doc Wednesday comes your way after the break.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Nearing the tail end of a Wednesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio, Elijah Herbel and Justice Rhody taking you through the show today. Schmidty's got the day off down in Kansas City watching the Royals and the Yankees. He'll be back tomorrow. But the show must go on, and where we go next with this show is a Jock Doc Wednesday. Dr. Brandon Seifert joins the show from Nebraska Orthopedic. And Dr. Brandon, it's a bye week for the Huskers. No bye week, though, in the orthopedic world. I'm sure you're still busy with all the high school sports going down. How are you doing on a Wednesday?
Hey, I'm doing great, Elijah. How are you guys?
Doing really well. My fantasy team banged up, got some bye weeks to deal with this week. But other than that, I think the season's going well. Is your fantasy team doing all right?
Well, we're struggling a little bit. I think we need to do a little bit more research.
That's fair. That's how most people feel at this point in the season, because this is where the wheels start falling off for the teams that are going to finish near the bottom. And it's where the teams at the top are like, oh, crap, what am I going to do? My star player just got hurt. And Dr. Brandon, I think a lot of people are feeling that way with Rashee Rice, as He has torn an LCL. That's one of the ligaments in the knee. The initial fear was that it was a multi-ligament knee tear. The ACL was kind of in question. Once he got under the knife, they confirmed the ACL was still intact, but the LCL is gone. It's going to require a surgery to fix, and it's unsure whether or not he's going to be able to make it back in time for the end of this season. So that's where we turn our attention for a Jock Doc Wednesday. What can you tell us about the LCL injury? It seems a little bit weird. You don't hear about it very often, that the LCL goes and nothing else in the knee goes with it. What is this injury like, and why don't I hear very much about just singular LCL tears?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it is a really interesting injury pathology dealing with the LCL. It's not as common as, say, the other areas that we deal with, like an MCL, which we've talked about before here in the show. Obviously, we've got our ACL injuries that we see. But the LCL injury, pretty uncommon, tends to be more of a force that pushes that knee basically towards the outside. So a lot of our injuries happen where you get hit on the outside of your knee and it pushes it to the inside. We call that a valgus force. With an LCL injury, now you're looking at more a force that's directed towards the outside into the back. So you're getting more hit from the front. And what happens there is all those forces obviously get transferred through that joint. It starts to push the joint to the outside, and that forces that stress, obviously, to that LCL. Very rare to have kind of an isolated LCL injury. There's actually a complex out there that we see more injuries to. It's called the posterior lateral corner, and essentially what that is all those structures that support the outside or lateral side of the knee. There's 3 or 4 main kind of ligaments out there that basically form a whole network of supporting structures for the knee. It doesn't sound like he had that, but my suspicions are he probably does have at least a component of basically a posterior lateral corner injury. They're just maybe not describing it well to us.
Dr. Brendan Seifert here with us. And Dr. Brendan, I want to ask you, there was also repair done to Rice's hamstring tendon. There was no structural damage there. Does that add on to the recovery time anywhere? And do you think that Rashee Rice could be ready to go? Is there any procedures or any treatment he could do to try to get back on the field faster?
Yeah, if they're doing some kind of work on the LCL, some kind of ligamentous either a reconstruction or ligamentous repair, it usually takes quite a while to recover. So I think they're being quite optimistic that he's going to even make it back by the end of the season. But this could have been a process where maybe they went in and did more of what we call an internal brace, where they put some suture in around where the kind of the stretch injury happened. If it's more of kind of an add-on to what they already have for structure, like an internal brace, then you potentially could come back, within a season. But if they did any kind of work where they had to literally do a repair on either that hamstring tendon that hooks into that area or a ligamentous structure, my thoughts would be this has got to be at least 8 weeks to 12 weeks kind of endeavor.
It's Dr. Brandon Seifert with us here at Jock Doc Wednesday, discussing the knee injury suffered by Chiefs wideout Rashee Rice. And Dr. Brandon, as you talk about that timetable for recovery, 8 to 12 weeks is what you put it at. I think the report from the Chiefs is they're expecting 3 to 4 months, which kind of puts it right at that end of the regular season, getting into playoff time. Is there any danger if he feels like he's ready to go, if the knee looks fine? Is there any danger to rushing him back out there for postseason football in terms of his long-term knee health?
Yeah, the biggest thing would be you want to make sure that quad strength is back. So obviously that number one factor of making sure your quad strength and that functioning of that quad is back, that's the key thing. Then there's always that second factor there of, feeling confident that, one, you can make the cuts you need to make, and two, that you also feel confident that you can get out of the way so you don't injure yourself, in another direction. So those are really key things. But anytime you're talking about some kind of accelerated rehab program, accelerated recovery program to get back in play sooner, those risks are always elevated in terms of what's the re-injury risk to that area. Typically, ligamentous healing, in particular ligamentous reconstruction, those are typically processes that take anywhere from 8 months up to a year. And so this would be a pretty shortened timetable. Obviously, we don't know exactly what they did surgically.
Dr. Brandon Seifert with us here. And Dr. Brandon, as we talk about the 4 ligaments in the knee, is the LCL one that is easier to return to play from? Are they all about the same? What is that process like as you kind of change which ligament is damaged and injured in that knee? Does it change the return to play protocol and how long a guy is going to be sidelined at all?
Yeah, it really does. Just as that's such a bigger structure, it's not just that one ligament there, but that whole posterior lateral corner complex, it takes a lot more force to injure that area versus like an MCL. So one, I think it takes longer to recover. Two, I think it's a higher kind of mechanism of injury. There's just more energy that has to go through the knee to create that injury, which means, again, worse injury, longer, recovery time, and potentially poor outcomes. In terms of that return to play kind of level, it's not as good with a posterior corner injury versus like an MCL type injury. I wouldn't say they're terrible return to play rates, but they're not as good as like a medial side or MCL type injury.
Dr. Brandon, I wanted to ask you, with Rashee Rice, what's the protocol here for getting him back to a ready-to-play stance? Is it a stay off of it for 8 to 12 weeks and then slowly try to work your way back, or is it after about the 4-week mark, we're trying to get into a little bit of physical therapy? What's the procedure with an LCL and a hamstring tendon repair?
Sure. And so for us, especially in the sports medicine world, we're always so focused on trying to regain motion quickly, regain quad strength quickly. And so therapy early is important. And so they will start that. The part of it they have to be careful with is anytime there's kind of supplementation of a ligament, repair of a ligament, you do have to give that an opportunity to heal. And so with your therapy, there's some really specific things they'll do to essentially protect the ligament repair. And in addition to that, being able to still do range of motion and quad strengthening with it. And so those are kind of the big things that they'll have to find that balance. But he'll still, from a weight-bearing perspective, I would assume, be weight bearers tolerated on this. They might have him, though, kind of what we call locked in a brace, where you have a brace on that keeps your knee locked out straight, just to protect that ligamentous repair. And there's probably a 4-week course of that, even though he's putting weight on it. But then they still mix in physical therapy on top of that.
Dr. Brandon, one of the things that makes Rashee Rice special, and we'll get you out on this speed combined with the agility in their route running, how will that be affected in your eyes as he tries to make a return from this injury? Could that change the trajectory of his career, this knee injury?
Yeah, he probably won't look amazing at the end of this season, just since that seems like such a shortened timetable for recovery. But as he gets, a year through this injury, recovers, I still think that potential to come back, to cut really well, to have the agility that he had previously, I still think there's a great opportunity for that, especially in sense of it doesn't sound like the ACL had any significant involvement. I think the biggest concern would always be, the opportunity to kind of retweak the area, re-injure the area. But otherwise, if he can avoid those kind of things, those retweak events, I think he'll do really well.
It's Dr. Brandon Seifert with us here at Jock Doc Wednesday, talking Rashee Rice. Go visit him out at Nebraska Orthopedic. Dr. Brandon, thanks for the time today.
You bet, fellas. Take care.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time here on a Wednesday, it's Hail Varsity Radio. Elijah Herbel and Justice Rhody taking you through the show today, and we've had plenty of good stuff for you as we've had to take a bit of a step back. Some big picture things as a part of Nebraska's bye week. We opened the show by discussing Matt Rhule. How do you grade his first 18 games in charge of the Big Red? That's where we started the show. We hit that with both Mike Babcock and Evan Bland. And if you missed either of those interviews, you can check those out in podcast form, or you can check out the full show as well wherever you get podcasts. Just search up Hail Varsity Radio. You can Google it as well. You should be able to find it again. Husker historian Mike Babcock, as well as Evan Bland with the Omaha World Herald. We just heard from Dr. Brandon Seifert as a part of a Jock Doc Wednesday talking Rashee Rice. So if you're a Chiefs fan or if you have Rashee Rice on your fantasy team and you want the prognosis, go check out our interview with Dr. Brandon Seifert. Again, wherever you get podcasts. You can also find us on the Hail Varsity YouTube page. Just go to YouTube, search up Hail Varsity, and it should be the top result every single evening on that Hail Varsity YouTube page, where you can check out the full show in video form. And while I'm here, one final reminder to join us for the live stream. There's a live chat going every single day on the Hail Varsity Radio YouTube page, where you can get in with all of our friends, get in on the Hail Varsity Radio starting 5. Get yourself a shout out, get yourself involved with the show. That is how you do it. And as we wrap up this show here on a Wednesday, remind you that Schmidty will be back with you on a Thursday edition tomorrow from 4 to 6. Where I want to wrap this show up, Justice, is something that you put into the live chat on the Hail Varsity YouTube page. You have been to the was it the Tiger King Animal Sanctuary? What is it called?
I don't remember the exact name of it, but it's like it's like basically the Tiger King Adventure Park in Wynwood, Oklahoma. It's about a 3-hour drive away from my house. For context, I'm like 45 minutes away from Stillwater, so that's why the Oklahoma State relation comes up. That's why I mostly, identify with them as like the childhood team before I was converted to the Cornhusker way. But yeah, interesting experience there. A lot of different animals, not just a tiger there. Really interesting experience. Did not see the Tiger King.
Well, he's in jail, right?
Yeah, he is. It was a tour guide. It was like 2018 when I went.
So was this is before the documentary then?
This is before the documentary, but he was not there. It was a tour guide. It was just one of the nice young interns that was working there that showed us around the park. But really interesting. Tigers, very big, very scary. Did not try to feed the tigers. I was scared that I was going to get my hand ripped off. So no tiger feeding there at all.
So with that, like, what was your reaction seeing the documentary? Or the docuseries, I should say.
I'm going to be honest, it was pretty on par for about what I saw there from the stuff that I heard. That's about all that I'll give it. I'm totally not surprised that stuff was going down in a place like Wynwood.
Have you seen the new series from the same producers, Chimp Crazy?
No, I haven't.
Very, very similar concept of people, except it's people that are crazy about chimps instead of tigers.
What? Like, I gotta know. Like, are these people like from the same vein of humanity? Like, how are we getting people that are this obsessed about a specific breed of animal? I gotta know.
I mean, I like dogs.
I like dogs too, but it's like chimps and tigers. What's next? Are we gonna get somebody who's obsessed about dolphins?
Yeah, there's one of the women in Chimp Crazy is like, she treats the chimps like they're her children, and it was very, very weird. It was just weird to see, like, the way that she threw them birthday parties and all this weird stuff.
Not good mojo there at all.
No.
Not good mojo. Trying to end the Wednesday episode on good mojo. Not good mojo there.
Well, the good mojo is that Schmidty will be back on a Thursday edition of Hail Varsity Radio as we'll get you rocking from 4 to 6. Another show coming your way on Friday, and then the Saturday morning edition at 7:45 until 9-ish. So plenty more opportunities this week to catch Hail Varsity Radio. We'll talk to you tomorrow from 4 to 6. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Talk to you then.